Okay, welcome back to the Seafarer Social Podcast. I'm really excited about today's episode. I am speaking to somebody who very much cares about seafarers, just as much as I do. I've had some fantastic conversations with this guest so far. She runs her own podcast, and I'm very lucky to have Eva here with me today. Now, this is the first time me and Eva have spoke like this. We've been communicating over LinkedIn for some time. So there's still some questions I have for Eva around, what she's up to, but I know for a fact, based off the content I see her producing and the work she's done, that there's a lot of value Eva can provide for our seafarer listeners and our maritime corporate listeners as well. But firstly, I'd like to say thank you, Eva, for coming. And how are you?
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful to be invited and wonderful to see you. And I'm doing okay. Thank you for asking. And I'm really looking forward to tell a little bit about myself and the work today, and also to hear a little bit more about you so that I can also share what's happening in here on this platform you've created, which is awesome, if I might add.
Thank you.
So that, everybody just know about each other, right? This is what's nice, to be connected with each other, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. You've been supporting me since I started, so it really means a lot. And I think the maritime industry, although it's such a global industry, business side of it is quite small. Everyone kind of knows each other, and it's nice to be able to support other professionals. What immediately drew me to Eva is that she has been involved in actually forward-thinking nature has actually led to policies changing within the industry, which is an extremely powerful thing to be able to do. Which is certainly a topic I want to discuss about today. But let's bring it straight back to the beginning. Eva, can you share your journey so far and what inspired you to pursue a career in the maritime industry?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's okay. So my journey started in the Netherlands, where I was born, in the north, in a place where there's no sea at all. So I didn't have any seafaring family as it appeared. Later, we found out that a lot of my generations were building ships, actually, and were in inland shipping. So it is true what they say sometimes, that seawater runs through your veins, right?
Yeah,
So
sure.
that turned out to be pretty true in my case, but I was not aware of it at first. So that's interesting. And then I wanted to go work on ships when I never knew what I wanted to do with my work, right? I thought, yeah, there's so much I want to do. I cannot choose just one thing. And then I found out about, the maritime sector, and I thought, yes, this is nice, because then you can combine all kinds of things, right? It's technical, it's nautical, you can discover the world a little bit, you can see places, you can meet people, it's everything. But then I thought, yes, I was just a girl, right? I was just 18 years old. And I thought, will I ever, feel comfortable working on a ship surrounded by all men and males, right? So I thought, better go to this lovely island we have in the Netherlands. It's a small island in the north, and it has a maritime school with a campus. And, it's a little bit similar to life on board. You also have to wear a uniform when you were there. So yeah, it felt really equal to me, that uniform, which was nice. So I did that, and then I had my seafaring days for a few years. I was a maritime officer, so that's like a dual licensed officer. I was working for Maersk. What first was P&O Netloyd, but later became Maersk. And then I worked ashore a little bit as a technical superintendent, and I went back to sailing because I missed it a little bit. And then when I was working on a ferry, I actually became pregnant, so I had to stop it. And back then, you were also not allowed to work on a seagoing vessel while you were pregnant. And also physically, it was not so good for me, the pregnancy. So unfortunately, I had to stop that. And but then after I got kids, I remained working in the maritime environment, in the maritime sector. So I had a few jobs combining, family with work. In Groningen, where I live in the area, is a lot of maritime companies. So I work for a school and for a software company, for an insurance company,
Wow.
even for an offshore company for a while. But sometimes, it seems like a lot, but things just happened, and then I had to switch. So yeah, I was really happy to have this experience because it gave me so much insights into the different, aspects of what the maritime sector is. Yeah. So, and then just to hop on to your what you said earlier about the policy making. So my journey continued. When I was working for the insurance company, it was during COVID. So then the pandemic happened. Then, we had the crew change crisis, which I don't need to explain to this audience today how bad it was. And also, yeah, so I was just thinking what I can do as, to make sure that I help or support what was going on. And I just decided to be a little bit more active on social media in this time. So just to speak about it, to ask questions, just to reach out. And then I got a very wonderful message from this guy who said, are you interested in looking at if we can insure abandonment from a flag state? And I thought that was just the best question ever. I thought if flag state can take ultimate responsibility for what's happened to people who work on ships, that's what we want ultimately, right? Just to people, for states, member states, flag states, governments to take responsibility like that.
Yeah.
Through insurance is just a wonderful idea. So I went back to my colleagues at the insurance company and they said, yeah, but it's already raised in the MLC, right? So we already have it. So it should be good. And I said, well, we have this increasing problem. So it's not good. Something needs to be done, right? So anyway, long story short, that was the first step. And I got introduced to working in a flag state and I got this opportunity and I took it. I was super happy and glad to be able to do this. And then first I did it in the evening hours because it was the pandemic, right? Everybody was working at home and I had a lot of time. Not a lot, but as it goes. And then we ended up together with this delegation from this flag state into proposing a resolution for the crew change problem, which was done within a year. So it was adopted by the IMO. Yeah, by the IMO in the end of that year. So now we have another pandemic. We have an IMO resolution with a 5-step plan that was coming from, the CEO of that flag state. So that's really amazing. I think it still is an amazing story. And it shows also how if you focus on humans and if you focus on things that nobody can ever disagree with, right? Just fundamental, basic human rights, then you can get your community together and work together in a way that really makes things happen. Yeah. So after we did that, I worked on with this flag state on more human rights, and we focused on inclusivity and safety. Same, the topics of the podcast I'm still making, because this topic really goes to my heart. And so for the flag state, we raised questions at IMO. We introduced documents with, raising awareness for the lack of psychological safety and to, the bullying and the harassment going on ships and in the maritime sector, with proposals to amend education. So you have the STCW with, standards for training, watchkeeping, and certifications. And our proposals was to amend a certain module within the basic safety training so that all seafarers would be at least introduced into having more knowledge about social and psychological safety. And that turned out, so a lot of things happened, of course, which we can dive into deeper a little bit in a while. But as it turned out, now we have this model course adapted with addressing bullying and SASH. So unfortunately, it was not, so the language now is not focusing on psychological safety, but it is focusing on addressing bullying and SASH. So
And this
yeah,
is actually
it's good.
part of the STCW now as well.
Yes, well, it's like to get really technical about this, you have tables inside of the STCW code and conventions having knowledge, understanding, and provisions about what the education should be about. And then the model courses are like advice for schools to how they should implement these
I
tables.
see.
Yeah, so we adapted the tables, and also we made proposals to make the model course, but I was no longer involved back then because unfortunately I had to leave working for the flag state at this point of time. So now I can still see it in the news and see it going on, and also I have a lot of friends still working on it, so I'm hearing that it's going really well. um, and the IMO and the other organizations and member states within the IMO just took it, right? Everybody's now talking about it. And yeah, it's also good because it's the one big lesson I learned from all of this was that if you have, you know, like a very small amount of people working on this, it's, yeah, it's creating some kind of risk, right? You cannot see yourself sometimes.
Sure.
So the more people that work on, especially things like this, which involve human rights and safety and health, it should be worked on by as many perspectives as possible, as many people as possible. So I'm really happy and I'm very proud that this worked out this way. And and it would be lovely to talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. So that's twice. That's two examples that you were involved in changing policies. In
Yeah.
terms of the first one, though, I want to know a little bit more about that when it comes to the crew change crisis and the work you did with IMO. What exactly were the 5 steps that you introduced?
Oh, I don't remember it so well because it was a while ago, and also my then boss came up with the idea. He wrote like an article about it, which you can still find in the news if you just Google it, then you will
Okay.
find it. And then so the 5 points. Well, basically, what it came down to is if every member state just adopts basic understandings of that seafarers are key workers, that you have to protect your borders and boundaries, but you also have to keep it open for people who have to go through it, right?
Yeah.
Who need to go home. So yeah, that was basically what was done. And I think, if I remember, it was something with visas as well, or documents. Yeah, but it was really clear and very simple in the end. And I think that's for me, it was a really good learning experience because I was involved in everything. And I still feel very grateful that I was able to have this opportunity because, it's, yeah. So I'm always very happy to tell anyone about this because uh, yeah, as I see myself, I'm just, and don't get me wrong, I'm just nobody. I'm just like an insignificant person, like ants. If you look at our world from the top of the moon, everybody's just the same. And I feel that way about myself, I'm just somebody, just some somebody who used to work on ships and who's very, you know, uh, concerned about how people feel and how things are going. But to notice that you can actually drive so much change,
Yeah.
that was truly, yeah, I don't even have words for it. It was like, yeah.
It's
So
an
that's
amazing
also,
achievement. It's an amazing achievement. I should say as well at the beginning, I introduced you as not a seafarer. What I meant is not an active seafarer. Um, but yes, no, I totally agree. That's an amazing accomplishment to be able to do. I'm curious, do you think that it's possible to be able to be involved in making changes like that without necessarily working for a flag state?
well, interestingly enough, we then worked on the psychological safety project, right?
Yeah.
And I was having exact the same question to my boss, who is the head of the flag state, right? And he mentioned, well, let's set up a community because we can use the voices within a community, or a network of people to gather information, to listen to people, to see what's going on, to make sure that everyone is heard, to, be curious about what's going on. So
Yeah.
that's exactly what I then did. I just gathered, it started really small with just 5, 6 people. And then we started talking about it. We made some articles about it. We just promoted it amongst, the people that we know that could help us get the story out. And then what happened was that everybody who was interested in this topic came along with it, and we were open to all people. Still, I'm very open to connect with everybody who likes to talk about this and who has ideas. So what we did, we made a community who gathered around every 2 weeks digitally. So the nice advantage that I think of having digital meetings is that everybody just has their own square box, right?
Yeah.
It's very equal. Doesn't matter where you are in the world, doesn't matter who you are, you're equal to each other. That's what I like very much about meetings like these. And we just had an agenda, with some topics, so the education was a topic, data collection was a topic, and resources. And also, let me think. We also had a subgroup talking about the ISM code, so that we can connect more to the safety part and the responsibility part of companies or, entities or organizations, and accountability. By the way, that was also a big discussion point always. And that turned out to be really great. Because not only did we, take action this way, but also it was very great to see that people could also connect with each other. So especially
Mm.
around this topic, which is basically the foundation was an unsafe working environment, and people who knew the problem almost always also experience this, right? And if you have ever experienced this, who experience an unsafe working environment can very much relate to what is necessary, but also it's very great to have peer, how do you call that in English? To have a connection with your peers, right? To people
Yeah.
who have the same experience, or not always the same, but with the same basic understanding of what it does to you as a human. So that was also pretty amazing to see and observe, and to actually be able to lead a group like this was very exciting. It was really very exciting. Yeah.
It's definitely exciting. I mean, like you said, from a macro perspective, we're all just the same, right? And to be able to be part of such a change and creating a wave is a really big responsibility, but and not something that everybody gets access to. So being able to be part of numerous different changes is such an amazing it's such an amazing responsibility and privilege to have. But it's also interesting that even when you weren't working for the flag state, you were still able to meet like-minded people that shared the same thoughts and interests and still create an impact, which is amazing. So, from your experience, what are the sort of key challenges that a modern-day seafarer face in today's maritime labour market?
Yeah, well, I think there's so much. There's so much. And from what I saw is that the most, if you tune out really, really far, then the underlying issue, I think, is dehumanization, which takes place.
Yeah,
And I'm not really sure where the cause of this problem is. And also, I think it's a very difficult, interconnected problem. But basically, I think it comes down to that we're not we seem not to be attuned with who we are, right, as a person. Because I'm sure that if you stand into your own feet like this, like if you are you and you're grounded and you know what's inside of your heart and in your mind and what you want to do and what you want to bring to the world, then I'm sure you will make decisions that will align with that.
yeah,
But from what I saw is, and also you can see this in the news sometimes, when when it's a corporation, when it's a company, when it's a government, when it's like something without a heart, something without, that doesn't live, if you understand me, then decisions can be so dehumanizing for people who suffer the consequences of that decision sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
So, so I think what I noticed also is that if we can find a way to come together and make a connection together and make sure that we can all be inside of our own body like this, if you understand, then we can also learn from each other, and then we can just do something with these challenges that are now currently going on. Because I think if you cannot disagree with that, dehumanization is bad, right? It's just bad to think about people as numbers or
Yeah.
non-people. That's just awful.
But I think from my experience, and you've got a lot more experience than I have. I've only been in the industry about 3 years now, but from my experience in the maritime industry, speaking to ship owners and operators and managers, etc., 99.9% of the time, the only time really, really change is made is when it's related to profit or policy, right? Otherwise, the ship operators, the shipping companies, they're quite stubborn in their ways or slow to adaptation in terms of change. Now, I think when it comes to the human capital management side, seafarers are looked upon, sadly, as a commodity. And, not all companies are like that. Obviously, the big companies are much better. Maersk are fantastic. They invest in their seafarers much more than, say, some of the other companies do. But I think one of the most shocking there's so many shocking revelations that continuously come out. I recently was speaking to a guy called Steve Jones, who's the founder of the Seafarer Happiness Index, and he was explaining to me that still in some of the studies he comes across when he's getting this data back, still some seafarers don't have access to enough drinking water. So seafarers are actually thirsty while walking up, which is just insane to think that in 2024 this is still a problem. But I think one of the biggest issues for me, and that is definitely a huge one, but another one, which I don't think gets talked about enough actually, is the criminalization within shipping. How many times have you heard of stories when ex ship operator will have their ship chartered by a company? It's a bulk carrier. They get loads of containers on there. The crew have absolutely no idea what's going on in the containers. But they're sailing through, they go through particular oceans, the Coast Guard pulls them up, what's inside the containers. In one circumstance, it was mining explosives. I heard about this case where it was mining explosives. The captain and the crew had absolutely nothing to do with this whatsoever, not their fault in the slightest. They're just doing their job. The ship gets anchored and is within a Navy base for over a year. And the seafarers are just sat there waiting and no one can do anything. And this happens everywhere, all the time. And it's just insane to think that someone can control your life like that and pick you up and drop you whenever they want. And I think it's such a big problem. There's tons of problems for me. People talk about let's bring more women on board. I think that's a huge problem. Let's recognize individual communities like LGBTQ. I think that's a huge problem. But the biggest one for me is the criminalization and how these seafarers are treated. In what world can we forget about 20 people and just whatever, it's all right, the ship's there? That's insane. They can't even touch shore, and this happens all the time.
It is. And also what concerns me very much is that people don't know about this.
No one knows about it.
These people are really alone. When you tell, it's just, there's so many problems in the world right now, and this is such an underlit problem. So, for example, you remember still the big explosion in Beirut, right?
Yeah.
The big explosion with the chemicals that were for, how do you call that? I don't remember the highly explosive stuff that you use to fertilize grounds, right?
Yes, yes, yes. I think I know the story. Yeah,
So anyway, so guess how it came there?
of
And
course.
I was just amazed that not any journalist dived into this deeper than, because the underlying problem on that part was that nobody wanted to take responsibility for a
Yeah,
ship that was not. So the ship where the stuff was on didn't was not allowed to go to the Suez Canal somehow. Like, I don't know so much specifically about this
I've heard
case.
this story before. Yeah, I heard about this
Yeah,
before.
but the underlying problem is that nobody recognizes the actual risk, right? Like, everybody is just very concerned not to touch the hot potato like this. I think this is an
Yeah,
English expression, right? Nobody
yeah,
wants the bad stuff. Nobody wants to take it. Everybody's just passing it on, passing it on. And guess who is on the who always takes the hot potato? The people on board of the ship, because they're ultimately responsible. And all, if you can look into master's responsibilities, it's very easy to blame, because he's just a master, let's blame him, yeah, or her.
yeah. No,
It's just,
100%.
yeah.
And when
So,
they
and
try and
that's,
seek help as well, when they try and seek help, nobody really wants to, you know, if it's a, they want someone to talk to, yeah, sure, there's loads of help out there for that. If they want someone to bring them food while they're at port, yeah, sure, there's loads of help for them out there. If they want somebody to save their life, who's there? Who's there?
so I
I think
think
the
this is,
ITF do a pretty good job. I mean, I know the IMO they help out a lot as well, of course. But like, really, there are issues that are far bigger than just someone delivering some food to ship while they're at port. Like, there are actually catastrophic life issues that need to be dealt with.
yeah. Yes, and it's all about humans. So it's like, yes, what will you do if somebody is drowning? Do you give him a hand or just let him drown? Do
Yeah,
you actually care about somebody else? And it comes down to what I said previously. Like, I really, really believe, otherwise we'll just die from depression, I think, by the way. But I really, really, really believe that everybody in their heart is intrinsically good. Everybody
yeah,
has good and kind intentions inside of their heart. I really, really want to believe that. Also, I think it's just true. It's true. So if we can go back to that part inside of ourselves, also if you work in an organization like ITF, IMO, in an insurance company, in a shipping company, a ship manager, in a crewing agency, on board of a ship, it doesn't matter where you work. Also, that was the power of our community, by the way. You can just see what you can do from your position right
yeah,
now in this moment of time. Like, what is the tiny thing that I can contribute as being a small ant on this world? What can I contribute in and using my position? Especially when you work in a flag state. So this boss of the flag state just give me the opportunity to speak my voice in IMO, right? So he did that for me, right? So there's more people who can do that. If you work somewhere and you have the opportunity to give somebody else a chair at the table, or to give somebody a piece of information that might be valuable, to save lives or to just help somebody out, can also be super simple. But if we start doing that, we can actually make more change that you could ever imagine. Because things, what it comes down to, like devastating problems like seafarer abandonment and what we just mentioned, the general dehumanization going on, criminalization, just the whole blaming victim perpetrator thing that is going on. It just keeps us stuck in the same system. We need to rise above this, I
yeah,
think. We need to just get out of the blaming mode and see, okay, but what can we really do? How can I acknowledge that I did something wrong that hurt you, right, as a perpetrator? How can I take responsibility for that and accountability? What can I do to make it better so that I don't do it again? And as a victim, how can I make sure that I appreciate myself and also not stay stuck in the victim mode all the time, because then you will stay stuck as well in the same loop of things. So yeah, that's basically, I think, the solution.
no, I think you're right. I do believe that there is still hope as well. I think there is. especially with the next generation of people, people my age, etc., coming through. I think that we think differently, and a lot of that I think is down to digital media. But I think that there has to be a change, because you can make money and do the right thing at the same time. There is a way, and you do not have to crush people just to become rich. There is a way of being able to be profitable and ethical at the same time. Um,
Definitely.
and I hope that with changes like the policies you've been involved in, and more recognition of the industry, that this will change. Because the big thing for me is, I remember when I was in London Shipping Week last year, I was in a building called Fishmongers Hall, which is a very old traditional building, and it was the only talk about the whole week that was about humans. The rest of it was about sustainability and dual fuel and all these catchphrases we hear, which are great, really important. But it was the only one that week about humans, and it was the most important one for me to go to. And I just remember that we were in a room, and there's a saying in the industry: pale, male, and stale is what they call it, right? There was just a sea of white-haired white men in suits, all of the decision makers, and on the stage was all the CEOs of the charities. And I remember one of them asked at the audience, "Raise your hand here if you would recommend the career of seafaring to your child." And as you can imagine, 0 hands went up, maybe 1 or 2, just for the sake of not looking like an idiot. But really, when they were honest, and when they were challenged on it, they wouldn't. Of course, they wouldn't. And I think that is where the problem lies, because seafaring can be it is a very noble career, and I don't think seafaring is for everybody either. By the way, I think it takes a certain person to be able to do it. But I think that we could create a change in the merchant navy and seafaring in terms of perception, where people firstly know about it, which is the first key, but secondly they respect it so much that they want to be involved. There are huge upsides to it. There are also downsides to it. Again, it's not for everybody. I actually think that the mentality of seafaring is relatively similar to those that go into the military. It's somewhat similar. I don't think there's complete similarities, but there's definitely some similar characteristics that's necessary. And I think that more needs to be done. We need to make it more appealing to young people, which brings me to my next question about social media. How do you think the role of social media evolving in the maritime industry can sort of benefit the industry, especially in terms of human capital management?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And also following what you just said, because I think what definitely will help is that we share real stories. So just be upfront about what you experience and that counts for everybody. So if you are a seafarer, just share how your life is and be real about it, right? Just share what you're seeing every day. Just share what you're eating, what you're doing, how things go on board. Because in all kinds of ways that will bring awareness, maybe also from your own company. You don't know, right?
Sure.
And then, but we will talk about why it doesn't happen later. But what would be the opportunity to use your social media is to be real for employers, like maritime employers, like crewing agencies or shipping ship owners, or anyone who employs seafarers. It would be really great if you just be honest about what they're looking for. Like, who are the people you are looking for? What are the values of your company? Like, for example, if the value of your company is to be a safe and inclusive working environment, then you should just tell people, because there's loads of people out there looking for an adventurous job, an adventurous job where you can use your technical skills, where you can be curious, where you can, also why I went to work into the maritime sector was because it's so diverse. The work is so diverse, so it's very nice to do. And if you are, an employer, you can just be real about this.
Yeah.
Like, this is what we're looking for. This is what we're doing. If you would like to join us, then please do. And I think once you start doing that on social media, you can just reach out to people and they will find you, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, yeah, it definitely scares some ship owners and employers about seafarers using social media, because you're right. The stuff that gets the most amount of eyeballs is the real stuff, the nitty gritty
Yeah.
stuff. That's what draws attention. But I think they kind of have to do it at this point, because we're living in an age now where every single major story that's covered about shipping is negative. You know, someone's being attacked, some bridge has been knocked down, drone attack. Like, everything you hear about the industry is negative. And I think that the risk to reward now is just so in favor of one way, that, hey, look, even if this seafarer does create a vlog and maybe he does catch something in the background that doesn't look so great for your company, you kind of almost have to, if you really want to continue, having a good flow of recruitment, you really have to allow seafarers to be creative and tell their lifestyle, because otherwise you'll never be able to connect to the next generation of the workforce. And there's so many awesome things happen. Like, I was speaking to a captain, guy called Captain Thomas Lindegaard. He's from Maersk, he's part of the board of directors. I spoke to him the other day, and he told me, did you know that and I know Maersk is complete. You can't compare Maersk to the other shipping companies, but just in the circumstance of Maersk themselves, on the bulk carriers now, it's mandatory that each vessel has a swimming pool for its crew. I mean, I never knew this. This is such a cool fact, right? Like someone can make a video out of that, and people will be like, "That's super cool. I want to do lengths while I'm, in the Mediterranean. That's pretty badass." So, little things like that. The next generation, they're interested in hearing things like that. Things that you might think some might think insignificant. The next generation, they want to hear those things. That's fun. It's interesting. It's different.
It is.
So yeah, I think that social media is not the answer to everything, and I always say that, but it's such a important tool to get media over to the next generation. In fact, I'd argue it's probably the only tool. No one's really interested very much in print and stuff like that now. We're all fighting for attention. So, you have to be able to create valuable content that within a 30-second time limit. So, for me, I just think so much can be done in this industry. I always create links. I know it's different, but I always create links between aviation and shipping, and the maritime. I know they're completely different, but there's some similarities. And if you look at them from a digital marketing perspective, they're years ahead. Inclusivity, more women on board, making the workspace fun, thinking about the labor market. Being an honorable career. Imagine how many people, who wants to. Being a pilot is like, wow, I'm a pilot. People see movies and they dream of that. We can make that same thought about being a captain. We can do that. We can create that same feeling. We just need to put it out there.
Yeah, and I like your analogy with the aviation sector, and I came up with this other analogy as well to compare it to the space sector. So a ship is basically like a spaceship, right? It's in a very hostile environment. If you fall overboard, you will just die. Not you will just die, but you have your rescue things in place. You have your training. You know how to survive or how to that's not what I mean.
Sure.
But it's
and
hostile.
it takes a long time to get to places. In aviation, you can get anywhere in a day.
Yes. So, but on a spaceship, you're stuck with each other for like a long period of time sometimes. And if you're unlucky, like when there's a pandemic over there, you might be stuck in there, for a few years, maybe even, that's like. And if you make then the comparison to how we monitor and treat space seafarers, right?
Yeah.
It's different. It's very different. It's very different. And if you then think about this, let it sink in a little bit, then you're like, ooh, that's bad. What happened? Well, let's go back into time. Let's go back into time when when the space travelers are now discovering new worlds, right? Or maybe we will go to Mars or on the back of the moon or whatever. Well, we did
Yeah.
that in shipping a couple of 100 years ago, right? We went to the other side of the world. People would still think there's no other side of the world. They didn't even know how the world looked like. So,
Yeah.
and then they discovered all these nice places in Australia and America, and So, but these were seafarers, right? They were
Yeah.
seafarers.
Yeah.
So, and I'm very sure that people looked at seafarers back then in a different way that they look at seafarers right now. So I think the comparison to the space sector is an interesting one, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great analogy. I just think, when I remember when I was growing up, most of my friends wanted to do jobs that involved being in a uniform, right? Firefighter, pilot, doctor, whatever. But very rarely did anyone ever say captain of a ship, and why, right? It's such a badass title to be captain of a ship. But I just think, not enough is done from the root level, and that's a completely different conversation altogether when it comes to career advice, because my country could do way better with that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think that it's an awesome career for those who are prepared to do it, but more people need to know about it, and I think social media could definitely play a role.
Definitely.
Is there ever times that you, and thank you for quoting my video that I posted yesterday, but are you one to stay up to date with sort of videos that are going online from seafarers? Is this the sort of content you're still consuming?
Yeah. Well, I like social media. I like to limit it also because I noticed that it can be quite addictive. So you have to be aware.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think what I like most is just honest stories for people who just show what they're doing. So
Yeah,
you
I
have
like
like
stories.
well, and also posts and but honest tales. I think just for people showing who they are and what they do, just super super simple, and it's such a powerful way to make sure, because I noticed with myself, if I notice that this video is somehow edited or it has like a sauce over it, that some company wants to make a sauce over a personal story or something,
Yeah,
it irritates me, because I think, well, I can look up who this person is working for myself, right? It's just, but if you do a good job as a company, you hire people who really are on the same level as your mission and vision, so you can trust people that they share things that they like, right? And then also it would be beneficial for your company. So why the extra sauce? Well, so that's the first. The second thing is that you can be amazed who is actually working on these vessels, right?
yeah,
Because in real life, it can be somebody else than you ever imagined. So
yeah.
let me tell you a really quick, very funny story. I used to make presentations in primary schools to tell kids about career at sea.
Okay,
And
that's cool.
yeah, I've done that for a few years. And whenever I came up and they noticed that, so most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, they were like a little bit disappointed to see me, because they said, but this is just a teacher. I thought we have a real seafarer today. Yeah, well, I can imagine that, because
Yeah,
also,
sure.
I can imagine that. So I'm like, yeah, I recognize you say that, because this is, I have no tattoos, I have no beard, I don't look like a seafarer to you. I can understand why you think
Yeah,
that, but let me show you my pictures, because I did, and I showed them pictures of me working on an engine, me standing on a bridge, and this is the same tool you can use for social media, but then more accessible, just for people to look what's happening, and then you
100%.
will draw a workforce, I think. Yeah.
I mean, you touched on it then about not fitting the right profile of being a seafarer. What about inclusivity? Like, how do you think we as an industry can promote? And this is a big question, big hot topic. How do we get more women on board ships? How do we increase that 2% to something a little bit more even? Because, from my side, I can see why in some circumstances this industry wouldn't appeal to some particular females out there. My partner Charlotte, for example, I don't think would ever want to be a seafarer, but I think there's definitely a lot of women out there who would. How do we create a safe space for women on board so they feel more inclined to pursue a career as a seafarer? Because as far as I'm concerned, having 2% to 98% is so bad, not just because of diversity and inclusivity, but because actually from an operational perspective, the shipping companies are missing out on 50% of the world's talent, which is insanity. I mean,
Exactly.
you could have people that could really change your company and make you a lot more money. So yeah, how do we bring more women on board?
Good question. Thank you for asking. Because, first of all, I don't think that's about the women. I think the women, if you look at women working in the maritime sector, just points out, it just makes you alert on something. You know, it points out where you need to focus on.
Yeah,
So if you look at women in your, like, let's say you're watching this or you're listening to this and you are a ship owner or you're working for on a crewing department or a crewing agency, how would you feel if you would hire a woman to work on board of one of your vessels? How would that make you feel like inside? Would you be totally comfortable because you know that your vessel and the people who are working on your vessels are completely safe and inclusive for everybody to join? Because if this is a yes, then it doesn't matter if it's a woman or a man or any kind of person, because it's safe
sure,
and the
sure.
people know, you know. So if you look at this problem, it just points out where the where the real challenge lies, and that is in creating a safe working environment for everybody, like socially, psychologically, mentally, physically safe. And also, the biggest challenge, I think, is that people know how to have a working relationship with each other. Because when you work on board of a ship, you're not able to go home, right? You live on that vessel, you live together with your colleagues.
Yeah,
So you have to learn how to do that. So not only bridge resource management and, you have to dive a little bit deeper into what dynamics are into interrelational human relationship, right?
yeah,
And this is what I talk a lot about on my podcast episodes. I talk with a lot of people about this. We have one on gender dynamics that was super interesting. So I heard you say about your partner didn't saw that for her. Well, that's really good for her, and I can imagine because it's not for everybody, like you
yeah,
said. Also, um, but I was talking with my friend the other day, and we were talking about how we were as a kid. So girls, right? And we would like to climb trees and do stupid stuff, and I never wanted to wear dresses because I thought it was just inconvenient and stupid, and it will just be dirty anyway. And then she said, "Yeah, but this is like a girl's way." And I said, "But yeah, but to climb in trees is also a girl's way. Why can girls not climb in trees, right? We just assume this to be a boys thing or a masculine thing, but why? It can also be a female thing." And that's the same with seafaring. I have this, my favorite Instagram account is Women and the Wind. They're just three women who build their own sailing catamaran, I think it is. And
nice.
well, they're super laid back. If you look at that, you just have a good feeling. They're just sharing good vibes. But it also shows that not like the image you have inside of your head or how a woman should be or how she should behave or what she should look like or what she can do for herself to make a living is not so boxed up. It's not so, it can be wilder than you think, right? It's just, yeah. So I think that's the solution. I think the solution is, and you hear a lot of people saying things about diversity and inclusion. I think diversity is like a natural following of an inclusive working environment, because if you make, I would like to compare it to a garden sometimes. If you make the garden pleasant for all kinds of plants and trees and things to grow in, then the diversity will just flourish anyway. You have to make sure that the environment is good, and nice, and that everybody or everything has what it needs, to thrive. And you have to stay open. It's very dynamic. Like it's super dynamic. Some plants need rain, some plants need extra sunlight, some cannot stand sunlight. It's very dynamic. So you have to be open, you have to communicate with each other, with the leadership. And I think this is what we should definitely look at in the future, not only in the maritime sector, but also, for everything and everyone. Also in schools, by the way, this is also a big thing, but maybe it dives too much into
No, I,
things.
I I think you're right. Totally agree that creating a safer space for everybody is how you get everybody involved, and like you said, that will eventually create further diversity. I mean, from so my mother-in-law, she was part of the Navy. She was a Navy officer, so I guess you could say somewhat she's a seafarer. Um, and she's part of the LGBTQ community, and she served on board ship when it was illegal to be gay, and spent much of her life silent in hiding. And you know when but she carried on doing the job the whole time because she had so much commitment to the work. She fell in love with the work, even though the work didn't accept her for her, which I just think is, insane. How many people would do that, right? I'd leave. If you don't like me, fine, I'm out. I'm out. But it just goes to show you that when you find the right person, they can do the job for you, regardless of how much crap you throw at them. Why don't we stop the crap? Why don't we really open it up and have more of those people on board? Open the doors to everybody,
Yeah.
and promote it as a safe space. So when you do get those really strong workers, they'll stay with you for life, and they do the job because they're in love with the work. Um, and I think
Exactly.
and I've had some fantastic conversations with some of the most amazing female seafarers, um, and the grit they have is just phenomenal. Um, but each of them feels like they constantly have to um, remind people that they're a female on board. Like I'm a female on board, but it's like it shouldn't even need to be a discussion. I'm a big believer in just judging people purely by professionalism, um, and I just think that we're I think a lot of companies are on the right path towards diversification and so on and so forth. But I just think that we're not quite there yet, and I'd love to see more women on board.
Yeah, and everybody has their own abilities, right? So, for example, I used to work, in the engine room where you have to dismantle a big separator, like for fuel
Yeah,
separator, and those
sure.
big ones, like, and they could be super stuck, so they have to make a big hammer and knock the tool. So I was able to do that, but not so much as my some of my male colleagues were really like built strong guys. So I would ask them like, yeah, I'm not strong enough to continue. Can you please help me like this? But on the other hand, I can still remember that there was like a colleague of mine who was busy with dismantling a pump, like a pump house, because there was some kind of screw inside of it. And he didn't want to order a new screw because it was super specific and he really needed it. And, so he said, "Yeah, I cannot reach it," but he had super big hands, and I didn't.
Yes.
So I said, "Can I try?" Because can I just try? And I just went inside of the pump house and I got it out for him.
This
You're
this is
welcome.
such a good example. Such a good example.
Yeah. So we all have different abilities. Better use that, right? Better
Yeah,
see the power of the collective this way instead of focusing on all the differences. Because what also, are you happy when you focus on differences? No, it just points out what makes you different from each other. Sometimes it makes you unhappy, like you can be jealous or you can see what you don't have. Like it's better to focus on what you have in common sometimes, right? Like, oh yeah, we both like to work on a ship. Yes, yes. Well, you're really good in slamming things. I'm really good in getting tiny things out of pump houses like that.
exactly.
Yeah.
How did you
Oh,
maintain the heat? How many hours would you stay in the engine room sometimes?
Oh yeah, just normal working days. We would just in the schedule, because I was a dual licensed officer. The
Okay.
schedule was a little bit different. So we would have as an officer we would have 6 days in the engine room, just 8 hour work days, and then sometimes overtime hours when we have big maintenance in ports or something, because we did it all ourselves because the teams were bigger back then. Because my sailing days are already quite a while ago,
Sure.
but and yeah, and then 2 shifts on a bridge. So I think it was like the 8-12 watch and the 12-4 watch, and you switch every 6 days. Yeah, and I really loved working in the engine room. That was, and I love to have the diverse working environments. So, but I wanted to, if you don't mind, I wanted to reflect a little bit of what you said about people who are other women you spoke to who explained that they have to point out the fact that they're a woman, or remind people what they need, or that there's differences. I think also what we should recognize is that you if you're working in an environment that is dominantly male, you have to adapt yourself, right? And you have to also adapt yourself to certain behaviors that are not really nice for you sometimes. And that can put you in some kind of survival mode. And then you're also not able to reflect on yourself anymore so well because you're in this mode, because you have to thrive in this environment, right?
Yeah.
So to go back to your mother-in-law, who was like the Navy officer and have to hide that she was gay, I think that's because she needed to survive there. It was her living, right? It's
Yeah,
you need
sure.
to. So yeah, so that just points out how incredibly important it is to focus on safety first, and not necessarily the physical safety all the time, like wear helmets, making everything yellow, black tape, and having all of those checklists in place is very important. But also talk with people, make sure if you evaluate their performance, for example, you can also ask them how they're doing.
Yeah.
Like, do you need anything, or do you miss out on anything when you are on board of one of our ships? Like, can we help you in some way? For example, yeah, I don't want to be a very, I'm not sure, but I think it will be valuable. I heard somebody complain a little bit about when she was still sailing that she had to bring all of her menstrual products in her suitcase, and it takes so much
Oh my
space.
God.
Yeah, but yeah, you have to bring that yourself. It's not available on board. So if you go on a training ship for half a year, you should bring it for half a year. Yeah.
Sure.
Anyway, that's just a
But they
very
don't have
small.
sanitary towel bins on board though, right? This is one of the big issues I've heard. They don't have the sanitary towel bins in the toilets and stuff like that. I was speaking to a lady just recently about this. Insane.
Well, you have to recognize, and it's good we talk about this. It's environment made for males.
I
And
know, I
that's
know.
okay. That's okay because also females need to pee sometimes. So they just use the toilet. It's okay. It's okay. You can just take care of yourself, right? But stupid things like this, like insignificant things like this, is sometimes, yeah, it's not. It sometimes could use a little bit more attention, so to say. Yeah.
And how much would it
Or
really cost? Nothing.
no, but you have to be aware of it, and
You have to be
also
aware of it, yeah.
yeah, and also don't victimize the people who speaks up about it, right? Just if you
Yeah.
speak about it, just say, "Hey, thank you for pointing this out." Oh, it's by the way, it's the same thing as if you make videos of your working environment. A lot of employers are afraid that people will see things that are not in order, or
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
So I think that's just the wrong mindset, if you mind me saying, because that you should be thankful that it is pointed out in that way, like, oh, thank you for notifying this because we didn't see it and now we saw it, so now we can do something about it. Because assuming that there's no problem is a very big risk, I think, especially in a safety way. If you assume that everything is safe, yeah, you should just check always, and you should keep options open, and this is what's really safe then. So yeah, anyway.
No, I totally agree. There's it, you have to give people the safe space again to be able to talk up, but
Yeah,
act as well. But act like, that's sometimes the big issue, especially in this industry. The act. Like, how long does it really take to get things done? Too long, I think.
Yeah.
Decisions take so long in the maritime industry from
Yeah.
everybody. I never quite
Yeah.
understood why. But hey, um, is there any other things that you wanted to discuss before we close off?
No, I think it was marvelous to talk with you today. And, for any listeners here, if you have some questions or comments or things you want to know or want to say, then please leave them in the comments below, because I would love to engage and, to communicate and to connect. That's the thing I love to do most. And and if you ever want me to be your guest again, then please tell me, because it was a lovely conversation.
Likewise, yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Thank you so much, Eva, for agreeing to talk to me. And I hope that we provided a lot of value to the listeners. Obviously, a lot of the people that do listen to this podcast primarily are seafarers, so I'm hoping that we can provide value to the active seafarers out there, and start to begin some thoughts, maybe some new thoughts and some new discussions around the industry. That's really why I do this, and speaking to people like you reminds me that there's other people out there who have this forward thinking mindset. So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you also so much. And yeah, it's true. We are in this together, Yeah, that's the nicest thing.
Thanks, Eva.